Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Syncing with ServiceNow. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Got Eric Schwartz on with me again. Eric and I had a great kick it off intro podcast a couple weeks ago. Eric, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
I thought it was awesome to see the number of people on LinkedIn that responded to my post with your mention in it. Sounds like a lot of people over there have a high regard and high praise for you. That's great.
I hope people find this educational and entertaining all at once. So I'm glad that it's been received well so far.
Are you saying we have to be entertaining along the way?
Life always has to be entertaining.
It does. It does. Hey, I guess a brief bit of apology. Yes, our podcast is available online. I don't have it pushed out to the RSS feeds yet. I'm waiting for my artwork to be done so that we have a good logo, good icon for the podcast. But I will work on that just as soon as this one's done and get my graphical people on it.
Sweet. Okay.
So it will hit the world of the podcasting apps. I just need another week or two for that.
No problem. Well, then everybody can just get the backlog and listen and binge listen to it all.
I'm sure people are just dying to do that. No, I do think there's elements of our target audience that we'll need to go back and listen to some of the legacy things, and hopefully they'll find value in that. Well, today's blog is pulling up on the screen, my screen here. The name of it is How Human-Centered Design Yields Better ITSM Experiences. Do me a favor real quick, and this is from April of this year. Do me a quick favor. Explain what ITSM is to folks who may be listening for the first time or may not know what it is.
Yeah, sure. So ITSM is IT service management. And while there's a lot to unpack there, there's a lot of history from ServiceNow's perspective rooted in ITSM. Essentially, it's the service and the management of that service within the IT organization of a company and the company at large, right? So it could incorporate something as simple as, hey, I need a laptop. How do I get one? And like all of the necessary tasks and work that needs to be done in order to get it. It could be something as simple as a problem has occurred within our software or hardware infrastructure, and we need to identify what it is and solve it. But it can be as expansive as building a walk-up experience for your IT staff to help support your employees. And then it can also be interconnected with a whole bunch of other things like onboarding an employee or constantly managing your internal processes and then improving them, and many more, making requests, changes within your infrastructure and your organization. It's managing all of those things and putting that to work.
And where does the concept like Itil kick into that?
Yeah, so I think you mean Itil, and but maybe it could be different regions in the country could pronounce it differently.
No, Itil is a legal IT organization. You're right, and I just totally forgot how to say it again. I've been transposing those for years now. Dang, now I can't even say what. Give me the format again.
Itil.
Yeah. and I've started reading books in the past on Itil, and then someone introduced me to ILTA a few months ago, which is again a legal IT association, which I'm sure uses Itil.
It could. There's a lot of acronyms out there in the world of all kinds of things. So for me and from ServiceNow's perspective, Itil is the formal organization of ITSM, essentially, where it's multiple life cycles and stages of how you deploy, manage service within IT. And it was born in a time when IT was the Wild West, right. And there needed to be a consortium of decisions that people would adhere to in order to provide appropriate processes and whatnot, and be able to have some standardization around that, because IT and technology itself in the enterprise was kind of born and then bred as on demand, right? So there was no rules or regulations around it. And that's what Itil is. And it's gone through multiple iterations. But what I would also say is that even now, we've kind of gotten to the point where that standard concept and the different processes and structure around it are, a lot of it is almost assumed. And now we've been building on top of it. So while a lot of what ServiceNow does adheres to the Itil standards and allows you to deploy practices around Itil and the framework, you can do a lot more that isn't necessarily included in Itil, simply because the demand has grown beyond what the practice has been able to build on.
Is it true that like an ITSM product framework from a ServiceNow would just automatically include Itil type things that you kind of get just as by proxy of implementing a good ITSM solution?
Essentially, yes. I mean, ServiceNow will allow you to adhere to Itil standards out of the box without a whole lot of thought or planning involved.
Yeah. So I don't have to go get the certification. If I implement the proper ITSM solution with the proper consulting help, I'll get some Itil. I'll get a lot of Itil practices along the way.
In fact, that's absolutely true. And, one of the benefits of ServiceNow in general is the fact that you can deploy a ITSM solution and have it adhere to Itil standards and best practices without needing to be educated upon it. So, the way that we help you build workflows and the way that the product is organized with incident, problem, and change management, it's all it is all built upon the original Itil standards. And so if you deploy it, it will adhere to that, and you don't need to be an expert in it.
So that's probably a good segue back to the blog, which is, we've got this Itil standards, which is kind of the framework of products like the ITSM product from ServiceNow. But then at the same time, our number one goal has to be end user centric solutions that work for them, which I think is a big part of what we're talking about today with this blog. I should highlight real quick, Paul, I think it's Paul Hung, is the author of the blog. So we should give him all kinds of credit. We're just reviewing it.
Absolutely. Yep. And anything I say is my own opinion, but Paul has been great enough to make this blog for us to talk about. So thank you, Paul.
Yeah. So I think we've covered the first part here. Maybe we haven't. Is there anything around the human-centered ITSM concept that we need to call out before we dive into the rest of the blog?
Yeah. I mean, I would take this to note, right? So, for a long time, we were just talking about how Itil was, why it was created, right? To have compliance and regulation around deploying IT and how it integrates with business. What's happening now is that there's a somewhat of a shift. And that shift is when, after those established protocols were built, there was a group of people, of decision makers, that would basically take the understanding of the technology and what needed to be done and then deploy it out into the organization, and everyone else would just consume it because that was what needed to happen.
And those were typically IT guys, right? IT guys that thought like IT guys.
Absolutely. Exactly right. And the reality is that there never was anything else. Like, they were providing that technology, and potentially no one had ever seen it before. So they took it, they accepted it, they were told how to use it, and that was it. Right. And not too different than how it's happened in the consumer world, right? Where, the technology has kind of been brought to us, and in some ways there's been some changes, and those changes have been the fact that now people have a understanding of what their job is, what the tools are that are necessary for them, and they have their own opinions as to how to get work done and what needs to happen, right? And so the whole concept behind this blog post, how a human-centered design yields better ITSM experiences, is that instead of just taking a private conversation based on the understanding of X, Y, and Z, you're incorporating the opinion of the people that are going to be consuming the IT in order to be able to build those solutions. And without that approach, without that perspective, without their insights, you're doing your organization a disservice because you're not incorporating those needs, which will ultimately cause challenges for the people that are using it, for the people that are consuming it, for the day-to-day lives of the people at your organization, because how they do their job and the friction that they have with the systems in place all ties back to their productivity, their happiness, and the value that they're producing. And so it's this very well connected, one thing leads to another. And that's what we're saying here, is that when you start to consider ITSM and the initiatives within your organization, you really need to have a holistic, wide view approach to build it and make sure you're designing the systems for those people.
So Eric, are you trying to say that the IT department in a company is not for the IT people, it's for the rest of the business?
Absolutely. In fact, I would make the argument that it's always been that way, but I don't know if it's always been perceived that way.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I'm an end user compute Citrix guy historically, is that's because I realized a long time ago that me back there hugging my servers didn't do any good for the business. It was how the IT got in the hands of our customers or our end users, which will be the customers inside a corporate IT department. That's a no-brainer. But I tell you what, we as IT guys, and I'm guilty as being as self-centered as anybody else, we kind of lose sight of that a lot.
Yeah, it's very true. And I will tell you that one of the things that ServiceNow does very well in our interactions with our customers and our prospects is that, excuse me, we will sometimes monitor what's going on. We'll ask the customer, can we spend a couple hours just watching what it is that your staff is doing? And that alone, having that visibility, will be able to build the right solutions and be able to identify what they need. And without that, if you just said, hey, we have change management, or we have a virtual agent or something, and they're like, okay, great, let's just deploy virtual agent, and you just do it because it's a cool solution. If you don't really know what the problem is, you're not going to be able to solve it. And that's what this is all about.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a different way to look at IT, but it's definitely the right way to look at IT. So let's jump into this next section here. Creating enterprise IT workflows. Help us understand what Paul's covering in these couple paragraphs.
Yeah. So, one of the things I'll take some of the points that he's made here, and I'll add some of my own color here. Right. So, he talks about Apple's product launches, and essentially he's saying that they focus on the human element of all the things that they're doing, and the value proposition isn't purely technical. Like I was just saying, it's not just about virtual agent, it's about what you do with it and what the people are going to do with it. And same thing, Apple has become famous for their product launches. They just had one, a week ago, and it's about the people, what they're doing with it. And they have basically stopped talking about speeds and feeds and specs because it's really irrelevant. And comparing an Apple computer against something else, or an iPhone even against another vendor, it doesn't matter what the speed of the processor is or how many pixels are in the screen, really. Like sometimes, and I am guilty of this, I'll nerd out and look at that stuff, but the reality is that it's about what you do with it, right? And you'll see that when they show off the camera, when they show off the different pieces of software, it's about connecting with people and what they do with the content that they're producing. And in a similar way, from an enterprise perspective, when you look at what people are doing, you need to focus on the user experience, right? And the user experience is such a differentiator from you as an organization and what you're building and what people are going to be doing on a daily basis, and also what those people will be producing and how they view their day to day, right? And so it's important to incorporate that. It's important to showcase that to the users. So when you do roll out new IT systems, that you not only have you taken what they do into account, but now you are including them in that. You're showing them what's possible. And and I'm probably jumping a little bit ahead here, but one of the other things that you are incorporating into those thought processes is the tasks that they are doing and taking the mundane, high friction things that they are doing that they don't want to do, and being able to automate that with the systems you're deploying so they can focus on things that they deem valuable and that will ultimately be valuable to the business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's look, going back to it again, we're all about the business and how we apply to the business, and that's why we call it an application to begin with. And one of the things I want to say about you guys is you're doing all that while taking the infrastructure, because it's a SaaS solution, and making that invisible. You're tackling it from both ends, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are as much a software as a service as we are a platform as a service, and we're providing that platform to these organizations to build what they need on, to build those experiences. And you'll hear this tagline all the time with ServiceNow: behind every great experience is a great workflow. And I think I talked about this in our last episode. ServiceNow is all about experiences, and by doing that, we're building workflows. Workflows is automation. We're automating things that happen in your organization, which ultimately leads to changes within your company and within what the people are doing, right? So we're incorporating all of those aspects. To talk,
you guys are doing it by attacking the easy things that are repetitive. You're also attacking some of the things that are hard to do and making those easier, so they're less hard to do, and people are encouraged to get them done and move on and get the rest of their job done.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we do really well is we empower the organization to consumerize the experiences that employees have. And that's what also this article is talking about, and where people in their consumer world interacting with technology have become accustomed to it just works. It's easy. I can order something in a split second and have it arrive at my door 2 days later. I can call a car that is going to take me anywhere without needing to know who I'm calling or who's even driving it or anything like that. And it's not just the initial request, but it's the follow-on experience of being able to track it, look at it later, etc. And so when people come to work, they want to have those same experiences. They don't want an antiquated system to be putting in data and then having to work with it and then, print out something and bring it to somebody at the cube next to them. Like, they want to have a system that's easy to use, that knows what they need to do. And that's what the human-centric approach here is. It's about understanding what the people want, and then enabling the platform to build those experiences for them.
Right. And Eric, is it not true that this platform that you've referred to a couple of times extends beyond IT, and you see companies using it to provide that customer experience on the back end of some of the things they're doing that are outside of IT management? That's true, right?
Yeah, and so I mentioned this earlier, right? So ITSM is where ServiceNow started. Our great founder, Fred Luddy, basically built ITSM as the first product that we came to market with. And it has greatly expanded and continues to expand every day. And ultimately, I'll give you a great example of why it is expanding. I mentioned onboarding. When you bring an employee on to an organization, the experience that they have with you as a company, both before they start and then immediately following, and all the work that has to be done to get them aboard, is critical. The amount of time that it takes, how easy it is, etc. And so onboarding is a complex process that includes a whole bunch of tasks across multiple groups within an organization, IT, but HR, finance, legal, etc. And building workflows around them to have those different divisions work with each other is super critical. And ServiceNow understands that. And that's why we've made investments into the different product lines that we have, specifically to enable those kinds of experiences at an organization, to expand far beyond IT while still connecting it back to IT. Because when somebody starts, they need a laptop, they need an email account, they need access to whatever it is they need access for, they need software installed, etc. So as much as IT is at the core, it still expands to a whole bunch of different initiatives and groups within a company.
Yeah. Yeah. And those use cases are limitless.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we have some prepackaged solutions that will help you with HR or customer service or security, but we are also, as I've said before, a development platform. So if there's a use case that isn't occupied by one of our currently shipping solutions, you can build it, and it really is limitless.
Yeah. Hey, so have we covered the human-centered ITSM imperative as part of the dialogue on the previous section, or do we need to expand upon that?
I think that we've covered that component pretty well.
Okay. And then the next section of the blog here talks about, how to get started with the human-centered ITSM approach. What's Paul covering here?
Yeah, so this is touching on what I mentioned before, right? So you want to take that approach where you are going to do the research to determine what it is that people are doing. And that's the only way you're going to build an experience for them that takes away the mundane tasks, that makes their job easier. And this is all about doing observations and ride-alongs, and really asking them in a non-confrontational way, like, what's working, what's not working. If they don't provide honest feedback, then you will build a system that is built around false pretenses, and then it's just going to be a snowball after that, right? And this is about building those systems based on that feedback to make sure that you can fix a process that doesn't work. I mean, it happens. Nobody's perfect. No organization is perfect. But look, you go to interact with the DMV. I'm pretty sure that it's across the board in every state. Those interactions are not perfect, and they've come a long way, but there's still a lot that can be done. And that's what it's talking about. It's, let them talk to you as the person who needs to renew their license and ask, how do you want to do it? Right. And that's what this is about.
Yeah, you got to start by asking multiple pieces of the story. What do they do? How do they do it? How does it work? And then once you get it implemented, you turn around and ask them again, how's it working? What can we now do? It's again, limitless. It just creates a constant opportunity to solve problems with technology, and let technology be a driver for solving those problems, not the dictator of what you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And ServiceNow also has something, as I mentioned before, called Continual Improvement Manager. And essentially what that allows you to do is you build this system, you build the workflows and experiences, and then you can constantly manage and improve them. So you're always able to take feedback and modify and edit. It's not where in previous generations of business where you had to build a system, build a process, and then it just was that way, and changing it was a Herculean effort. It's not like that anymore. You can deploy something based on information, and then if the business changes, you can change it too. And a perfect example is what happened with the beginning of the pandemic. Right. Thousands of businesses across the land needed to change on a dime to be able to modify how they interacted with both their internal employees and their customers. Right. And having the right investments in the appropriate platform to be able to make a pivot so quickly is the difference between staying in business and not staying in business.
I call that the ability to say yes. You're sitting in a business meeting and the technologist in the room already knows that whatever they say, the answer can and should be yes, whatever the business needs.
That's right. I mean, the people say the customer is always right. And in this case, the business needs what it needs, and it's the people need what they need, right? If you can't give it to them, they can't do work. Right. So,
yeah. Oh, I love this. And the idea is you can say yes, but because of the structure that we've talked about in the early part of this conversation, you can say yes, and yes is the right way, not hacking something together on the fly that totally takes all the standards out of play. And next thing you know, you've created a bigger mess for yourself in the long run.
Right. And that's going back to Itil, right? And how the fundamentals of ServiceNow are built on Itil,
Yep.
and the fact that we make it very easy to be able to analyze and audit what you've done, not just from a workflow standpoint, that you've built a workflow and these people collaborate and this work goes from one group to another, but even in the IT systems, right? So if there's a problem and you discover the problem and then you fix the problem and then something else happens, when you create a ticket, it's going to have all that intercorrelated history, right? We have a database of all of the assets within the organization and the people that they're tied to and where they live and where they are. Not the people, the equipment. I mean, I guess we could track where the people live, but that's not the point. But and being able to go back and audit that and then make changes when your systems change or your demands change, having that information at your fingertips is huge. And we don't do that just for the internal IT staff. We give that to the external employees too. So when somebody says, hey, my email's not working, whether they're interacting on a search in the knowledge base or the virtual agent, or even just calling someone in IT, and then the IT person is opening up a ticket for them, we are constantly producing or procuring the content that we have, like, hey, this has been a problem 400 other times today, or hey, there's already these how-to articles on how to change your avatar on the corporate page. Things like that we're constantly trying to be proactive about, that makes solving all these problems so much easier. And I mean, in some ways fun, although somebody might argue that, but it makes it easier to solve them, which makes you more productive, right? The less time you are spending figuring out how to change your email avatar or your password, the more productive you have with the job that you're supposed to be doing.
And Eric, the next evolution, human scale design, I think we may have touched on this a little bit, but what does this bring in to the story here?
Yeah, so we have touched on it a little bit. I've mentioned virtual agent a few times. This is essentially talking about how the evolution of technology that's available to us as people and businesses would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. It seemed like science fiction, right? And so we have AI and machine learning within the ServiceNow platform that can we have a product that is powered by those capabilities called predictive intelligence that allows you to deflect service tickets before they even happen, right? That's part of what I was saying, where if you start typing something, we're going to start producing suggestions that are related to it. But even more so than that, we can understand historical problems that have occurred and then make predictive analysis on what is going on by monitoring your IT infrastructure and say, hey, guess what? The last time the memory utilization on this server was over X, you had an outage. And guess what? We're predicting that there's going to be an outage soon, so you need to do something about it. And you can have the system do that without any human interaction at all. So it could be as complex as that, something on the back end, or it could be something as simple as having a Amazon Echo sit on your desk and be like, hey, Alexa, my laptop died. And she's probably going to respond to me in a but and now guess what? I have an IT ticket open and my laptop's being replaced. That's like Star Trek, and we can do it. And we can do it without having to buy a massive infrastructure or have rocket scientists design it.
Yeah, it could be as simple as that intelligent device sitting on your desk. I won't call her by name. Knowing that it's 10 o'clock at night, and every Monday night, Andy sets an alarm for Tuesday morning at 6:30. Would you like me to go proactively do that for you, as an example? Or it could be, hey, schedule me an Uber for 3 o'clock tomorrow to go to so-and-so place. That's tying a bunch of systems together, but that's kind of where we're at, and it's certainly where we're going.
Absolutely. And like you've said before, sky is the limit. I can't wait to see where this all takes us. It is, and I'm a big sci-fi fan myself. And so, you know, when you see what they do, I feel as though almost that science fiction writers now are having a hard time building a story around what is going to happen in the future, because we're already there. And now the stuff they have to think of is like outlandish, and
Right.
you know, it's very difficult, and we're making it difficult. So I guess that's a good thing.
You know, for me, and I don't think you're quite my age, but the idea that I could have a face-to-face conversation using my phone or my watch was super futuristic. Now it's so mundane. My 5-year-old can do it and does do it on an everyday basis. The idea that I could watch a movie, a current movie, in the car while we drive to the beach. As a kid, I used to have to look out the window. I mean, those are great, simple examples. But imagine a world where a movie, the latest kid movie, just downloads to your kid's device because it saw on your calendar that next Wednesday you're going to the beach again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have plenty of examples of that in my own life as well. I have young children, and one of the things that I've noticed as I have automated a lot of systems in my house, whether it's the lights or the TV or other controls and whatnot, having a virtual assistant has enabled them, which are limited by the ability to read because they're not old enough, or the ability to reach a light switch.
Yeah.
That they now have control over the house. And that never would have been possible before. I would have had to have, taped a ruler to a light switch that hung down on the wall or something, and they don't need to do that. And the world is at their fingertips. They ask, the virtual assistant how to spell things and what, to do some math stuff before they even would ever have the concept of doing it, because they didn't know how to write or read yet, and it's crazy. And to be able to think that you can apply similar capabilities to that in the workplace, you don't even know what you're going to be able to do in the next 10 to 15 years.
For sure. Both in the workplace and your consumer, and then the crossover between the two. I'm looking at my Logitech webcam right now. I would love to go out and buy one. A couple weeks ago or a month ago or so, they were too expensive. If I could tell my intelligent device to let me, CEO of XenTegra, know when the price was below $180 again, and I'll order it, that would be extremely powerful. If not, I got to keep it in the back of my mind. And truth is, I forget, and it'll be 3 months before I remember to go look again.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think of, I had a really quick short story. I had the great fortune of working at a company where Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, was also able to, he worked there. He was a chief scientist, and someone from the audience asked him a question when he was up speaking with us, and they said, something around the fact that the future of technology and whether or not, of course, now I'm losing my train of thought about exactly what the question was, but he drew a conclusion about how technology and people are, we're going to be, I'm going to murder this analogy here, but it's like that we're going to be like dogs are with us, where we do everything for the dog. The dog just gets to sit there and have a great life. And that's essentially what technology is going to turn into, where we can sit here and focus on the things that we want to focus on and let technology do the rest for us.
Right.
And I wish I could elaborate more on that, because I don't remember exactly what it was said, but it was a great analogy. And it's pretty interesting when you think about it.
Well, something I would add to that is, I left my house this morning and my garage door opener was working. By the time I was in my second meeting at work, I got a call from my wife. The garage door opener is now broken again. The point there is there will always be problems to solve. We just need to use technology to make the easy ones easier or just done for us. Like feeding my dog tonight, if I could just tell my device to go put food in the bowl. And I can focus on other things that are more important, like fixing the garage door. And then maybe someday that one can be made easier too.
Yeah, it's possible, I mean, anything's possible. And I will say though that, and part of this whole article is taking the human-centered design approach, right? Where it's always about going back and really understanding what it is that you're attempting to automate, or what people are going to do once it is automated. You really want to put that thought into it. So you're not just automating everything or attempting to digitize every single thing that transpires, right? It's if you don't weigh what it is that you're doing and really understand it, then you're probably not going to do it right.
Yeah. Yeah, the human's going to have to figure out what's needing to be done, how does it get solved, but then use the technology to solve it, and then let the technology think about solving beyond what was thought of.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, hey, Eric, this is great. I'm glad we got to catch up on this. I'm glad we got to talk about people and how technology is solving challenges for people, and also lining up for the future of what we can do with these technologies. Anything outside of this blog that you'd want to bring up while we have these listeners?
Well, I appreciate it. I will tell you that ServiceNow's biggest event of the year is coming up. And I can pull up the dates right here because I already forgot what they were. But coming up in May, we have our knowledge event. And I highly recommend that if you're at all interested in ServiceNow, you can go in and register for it. It's going to be an all virtual event. And I think it's going to be on May 11th, is the first day, and it's going to be a big event. We're expecting to hear a lot about our new upcoming technologies and offerings within the platform. You're going to have the opportunity to hear from some of our executives, and I can't wait for it. I wish it was in person where I can walk the expo floor and shake hands with people, but hopefully next year it'll be like that.
Yeah, for sure. The human piece, right? We got to get back to the human piece, but for now, this is the best we can do. And I'm glad you brought this up. I need to make sure my team is registered for this.
Yep.
Well, Eric, thanks for joining me. Thanks again to Paul for putting together the blog. It was good to have that as a talking point, and we'll look forward to doing this again in 2 weeks.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.